Excited to present to you tonight, Erez Yoeli. Where is he? Oh, here he is. So Erez is my friend, colleague, and past professor. Everything I don't know about economics is kind of his fault, yeah. And so Erez works at Harvard University in their program for evolutionary dynamics. He also collaborates with Yale University's Human Cooperation Lab. And he's got a very interesting research focus. He will tell you all about that tonight. I don't want to take more time away from him, so without further ado, Erez Yoeli.
We're going to have slides.
I got you.
Great. So, my name is Erez, and as John said, I work. Oh, this is a great talk. Thank you, everybody. Do you want to try?
I got you. Someone.
All right, sweet. So let me start by talking about me. I'm just telling you guys what I do. I do two things. The first thing I do is I work, as John said, at Harvard with these two guys, and I write simple game theory models. Game theory is a branch of economics that uses very simple math to understand human social behavior. And I try to write simple models with these guys to try to explain things like why people have a sense of ethics that they do, or the sense of rights, the sense of altruism, the sense of beauty. That's a sort of more theoretical agenda that I pursue. Start on the left side. All right. I'm learning. And then every once in a while we'll write about that. So for example, the last time that we wrote about this, we wrote about the French train incident. You guys probably remember that there was an American who took down a gunman in a French train. And so we used a simple game theory model to explain why anyone would ever do something so stupid as to run straight towards a gunman who was trying to kill you. For those of you who have been in the Army, this is obviously a very relevant question. Why would anyone ever want to jump on a grenade for their colleague? So we developed a simple game theory model to explain that. And we explained it. If you're interested, you can read about it in the Times article that's here.
Does it sound us?
No. I'll read about it. If you want, I can tell you. And then the other thing I do is one of these, agenda I just told you about is a theoretical agenda. The other thing I do is to try to take that theoretical agenda and use the lessons from it and put it into practice. And that's the agenda I am going to tell you about today. And to do that, I work with this team that's based out of Yale, and we also read about this. So if today's talk is not enough, you can also read about these things online. You can find them on my website if you want. So today I will focus on that bit, and the main question that we're going to talk about is how to get people to do more good. And let me just sort of explain some examples of this. So one example is to get folks to buy more sustainably caught seafood. So maybe you guys recognize these labels if you've ever been to a Whole Foods in the United States. In the Whole Foods, they'll have these green, yellow, and red labels to tell you whether or not you should buy this fish from the standpoint of how sustainably it was caught. Is the fish reserve at risk, and was this fish caught in a way that doesn't harm the ecosystem in some other way? So how do we convince people to buy stuff that's labeled with a green sticker as opposed to a red sticker? Another example, how do we get people to conserve? Today will be, I'll talk a little bit about why people do good at all and what kind of pitfalls there are when they try to do good, and that we can try to eliminate so that they do more good. And then we're going to use that simple framework to try to tackle some real world problems. So we'll break you guys out into groups, and we'll present you guys with a case, You guys will have 5 minutes to discuss and give us one really good idea, and then each group will choose their best idea and present it to the rest of the group, and we'll move on to a second case. So that's the format. Maybe about 30 minutes of boring lecture, and then 30 minutes of meeting each other. Okay? And the one thing I do want to point out is today I'm not, even though I'm an economist by training, I'm not going to be talking about using prices. So one thing that everybody knows that you can use in order to change behavior is to raise the price of something or lower the price of something, to tax it. I'm not going to focus on that. The reason for this is very simple. The reason is that it's often the case that, first of all, everybody already knows about this, and I don't need to talk to them about it, but also it's often the case that that's impractical to do. So it's often politically charged to change the price of electricity. What can we do other than changing the price? It's often hard to raise the price of fish, because the fishermen get harmed by that. So what can we do instead of that? So we're going to be talking about something that maybe might be a little bit more politically feasible to do. All right, so let me start with presenting you guys with a little bit of a model. It's a really stylized model of why people do good at all. So I'm going to represent doing good. This is the agent that we want to do good. This is the person who we want to take a good action. That good action is to water the tree. So we've got two possibilities. You can water the tree, or you can axe the tree. If this were the end of the model, we'd be in trouble, because assuming that axing the tree somehow benefits him, or watering somehow costs him, he would be better off just axing the tree and walking off, right? But the good news is that this doesn't happen in a vacuum. Typically, there are some sort of observers, and so long as these observers at some point will interact with the principal here, the blue guy, then we're going to have an opportunity to actually support these contributions to the public good, this good behavior. How's that going to work? Well, suppose that the red guys have the opportunity to either help, represented here by the shaking hands, or to harm the blue guy after they observe what happened at this stage. Well, if they only help, I'm just going to click through all of these. If they only help the blue guy who waters the tree, and they punish the blue guy who axes the tree, then the blue guy is going to water the tree, right? So basically, for the last 30, 40 years, there have been a gazillion models that have the following flavor. First, blue guy has an opportunity to do good or not. Then he's observed, that action is observed by some observers, and those observers then interact with the blue guy. And there are a lot of variations of this model. Academics argue over the details of this model, but all of the different models have that kind of feature. And in all of the models, this is true. So long as these guys condition their interaction with the blue guy on whether the blue guy did good up front, we can actually support these good deeds. Right? That's it. So now we're going to take this simple framework. Any questions on that framework before I move on?
I have a question just in general. If you switch the axe of the watering canister,
You could support bad behavior.
Yeah.
Yes.
This model doesn't work also other way, vice versa.
It could work. So this model does not explain why we tend to see this equilibrium as opposed to the opposite equilibrium that you just described. You would need something outside of this model, and economists and others, of course, have studied that. But for now, you need to just believe me that this. What's that?
There's a pulling point.
I'll talk to you about it after. There are a variety of ways to get it. But the important thing for now is that this is an equilibrium, and you guys, this is the equilibrium that I'm going to use for reasons that I'm not really explaining here. Sorry.
Is the blue guy and the water seem to be one person targeting or multitudes?
In this stylized model, the way you could imagine it being more people is you could have this happen once, and then we could do it again, and this guy could be replaced with somebody else from here or somebody else entirely, and then you could get it to be more people. That would be one way to do it. More questions? There were more questions.
Does it make a big difference if the blue guy knows the people coming out?
It does. The more the blue guy cares about this interaction, the more he's going to be motivated to do stuff here, right? And that's something that we can attend to later on when we talk about the various interventions that we suggest.
I hope this isn't too abstract or big picture, but I'm just wondering how we're even. You keep saying this word good. I'm just wondering how we're even talking about that. Like watering the tree is good for one thing, topping the tree allows them to build a house, you know, how are we even defining what's
That's right. So
conversation?
typically the way this would happen, and I've skipped this, but the way that we would answer that question is we would actually put numbers for this for parameters with assumptions. So for example, this guy gets some benefit from chopping the tree, and it costs him something to water to water the tree. The benefit is, you know, there's some assumption that is made about how big this is relative to this. Then later he interacts with these guys. How likely he is to interact with them, we put a parameter on that, some sort of Greek number, Greek letter.
Yeah.
And then that Greek letter, you know, there's some value to this interaction. And the relative values of these interactions, weighted by the likelihood of the interaction happening, you get the idea.
Yeah.
So the details of the models depend on how exactly you write them down. So for example, you might have these guys interact infinitely, and then you get these infinite series that you have to add up, and then you compare those to this, et cetera, et cetera. But like, that's typically how we would build it. Any other questions? Great. All right, so let's look at these pitfalls. So the first pitfall I want to point out is this one right here. What happens if there's a wall, proverbial wall, between the observers and the guy who we really care about doing a good deed? Well, they can't see whether he does the good deed or not. Then they can't condition their behavior with him later on whether he did good or not, right? So I don't literally mean that there's a wall here. What I mean is whether or not they can find out about his good deeds. They see it or they find out about it some other way. If nobody ever finds out about the good deed, we don't expect somebody to actually bother to do it. But if people do find out about it, people will be more motivated. Now I should point out here, I don't really mean literally that they're thinking about this constantly and deliberately all the time. I don't mean that here or anywhere else. What I mean is that their psychology should somehow be built in order to be sensitive to whether or not they are being watched. And that can be something along the lines of like when you're in public, you are more pro-socially minded, and when you are in private, you're sort of focused on your own problems and not as focused about other people's problems. So that's the prediction here, is that your pro-social tendencies, your tendencies to care about others, are going to be turned on when we break down this wall. And therefore we make the suggestion that whenever possible, you make sure that people find out and get recognition for their actions. Other people should find out about those good deeds, and people should get recognition for those good deeds. Make sense? All right, so now I will show you a couple of examples where this has been done. And in this particular case, I'm going to talk about experiments that I've actually run, and most of the rest of the talk I'll talk about other people's work. So in this case, the setting is going to be Northern California, and we're going to work with Northern California's largest electric utility, Pacific Gas and Electric Company, for those of you who are from the area. And PG&E, like many places, has the following problem. Most of the time, they have plenty of electricity to cover the demand, which is represented here in yellow. But every once in a while, there are these really big spikes in demand. Now, these typically happen on really hot days. And the reason that they happen, by the way, is because we leave the air conditioners on at work, we go home, and we blast the air conditioners at home, and there's just so much demand from these ACs that the PG&E literally does not have the ability to cover that demand. It happens in New York too, by the way. I think it happens in Israel every once in a while when you guys get brownouts. So this is a fairly common phenomenon. And we want to find a solution to this. And there's a very nice technical solution to this. It's to install a device. It gets installed near the compressor of your air conditioner, and it learns the behavior of the compressor. The compressor turns on and off, on and off, on and off to maintain the temperature of your house. And it turns on and off fairly regularly depending on the temperature outside. So this device learns the behavior of the compressor. And then, if you activate the device, it actually just tells the compressor to turn on and off a little less frequently. So the temperature inside is a little bit warmer. Not a lot, maybe 1 degree Celsius. Most people don't even notice it. But if you have lots and lots of homes with this device on it, then it can actually reduce the demand at that moment by a lot, by as much as 1 or 2 power plants worth. So we would really love for people to be willing to install this device. The biggest hassle for folks is not actually that 1 degree Celsius. Like I said, most people don't even notice. The biggest hassle is actually signing up for this program in the first place. You have to call in, If you agree to all of the conditions and somebody has to come to your house, you have to be home, you can come in, they walk all over your rug with their muddy shoes, et cetera. And so like that's actually the cost we're asking people to pay. But if they sign up, they benefit everyone in California by making the grid more stable and making it less likely to have a blackout or a brownout. You had a question?
Do the devices talk to each other as well?
They do not talk to each other. They're just a radio switch that gets a radio signal from headquarters. The other questions about how the program works.
Do you mind if I try straightening the...
You can try, but I think because it is offset, you are unlikely to succeed.
Yeah.
I see what you mean.
Is it a
that
private
maybe
service
one?
provider that's providing the service, or is this?
It is actually a
something
program
that-
offered by BG. And in fact, these kinds of programs are very popular in the United States. They're considered the backbone of making a smarter grid. In fact, they're not especially smart for a smart grid. They're the dumbest thing you can do to make the grid smarter. But they are an important piece of making the grid a little bit more flexible.
Yeah? No?
A little better.
By the way, there's 3 more seats up here. If anyone wants.
We're checking Facebook. And make it so that people are engaged and asked to do something good for others when they're being watched by others. And the way we did this, it was really high tech. We used sign sheets, which we posted in the areas that are near the mailboxes. So we tried to find the most observable place that we could for these sign sheets where there was lots of foot traffic. And this is an example of that. It's a big piece of paper where people can write their names. We put a little pen here. Like I said, extremely high tech. But it is very observable. If you put your name up, everyone in your building will know that you signed up for the program.
What about private houses?
We only did this in buildings that had central mailbox areas. So this would not work for that. We'd have to have a different solution for that. We did have a fairly well-controlled experiment in order to check whether or not our suggestion was going to work. So rather than compare sign-up sheets to phone calls, which are quite different, we actually compared sign-up sheets that were where you wrote your name down to ones that were anonymous. Let me zoom in so you can see. Here you just write your personal code and the date. Here you write your personal code and date, your apartment number, and your name. And we compared sign-up rates to see if this thing that we were suggesting would work would indeed work. And I wouldn't be standing in front of you today telling you to do this if it didn't. The thing that might surprise you is how well it worked. So here's the sign-up rate in the anonymous streaming group. It's about 3%. The sign-up rate in the observable tree for the group is 3 times as high. So it's about 9%. Now, if you've ever done direct mail advertising, somebody's chuckling in the back.
And then surveys.
Okay. What is your response rate on surveys?
Really low.
Like 2%, 3%, 1%?
Yeah, not 2%, because I do it like 6, you follow 6 like steps. You can get to like 2%.
Yeah. So this was actually considered a pretty good response rate. This is considered unheard of. So when I show this to people who work in the industry, they think, oh my gosh, how did you do that? Now, we did a couple of things to change things. That's why we got a slightly higher thing here. We actually delivered the mailer by hand as opposed to the mail, things like that. But regardless, you can see it's a very, very good effect.
And was it pretty expensive to implement?
So I actually basically implemented it with the help of these 2 guys over here, my mom and my brother, and 2 RAs. And I ran basically a mail house and a calling center for 10 months and did this myself. So I think that if I can do it, then probably any utility in the country can do it and hire folks to do it. I don't think it's a lot more expensive than just having a hotline or someone to call. It's a little bit more expensive, but doable with a few grants for grad students. And there are technological solutions other than sign-up sheets that might be cheaper. I don't know, and it depends on how you want to scale them and whether you want to get to individual houses and so on and so forth. But I think, in general, I think this is not very expensive to pull off. And the impact is quite good. Let me compare it, in fact, speaking of expense, let me compare it to the other thing the utility was doing to try to get people to sign up, which was paying them. They were giving people a $25 bonus for signing up for the program, and it turns out that that $25 bonus was not increasing participation as much. In fact, it had 1/7 the effect of the intervention that we had, where we came in and put the sign-up sheets up. So at the end of this, the utility came to their regulator and they said, actually, hey, like this money is just wasted money. It's not changing behavior at all, whether we offer it or not. People are not really signing up because of this money. And so they said, do you mind if we either eliminate the bonus or raise it? And of course, the regulator told them to raise it, so now they have to pay more. Okay, let me tell you one more. People really care about the relationship. Somebody asked that question earlier, right? Where settings where we really care about the relationship. Maybe somebody in the back. Sorry. Okay. So it's going to work better in settings where we really care about the relationship of those who are being observed by. On the right over here, we've taken the sample and we've split it up by owners and renters. And I want you to compare the difference between the red and the blue. This is the anonymous and this is the observable. For these guys, the renters, versus for these guys, the owners. Look at how big a difference there is. The average sign-up rates here are higher because renters tend to live in apartment buildings where this tended to work better because the sign-up sheets were in more central locations. But the difference in the treatment, the impact of our suggestion to increase observability is relatively small. Whereas the impact here is huge, right? It's absolutely enormous. And presumably, we don't know for sure, but presumably that's because these guys are around for a really long time and really care about their neighbors. These guys are I've seen the difference. The fact that we have an experiment, we can sort of rule that out. Any other questions? Okay. Now, one of the things, before I move on, let me tell you that by no means were we the only people who have done experiments in this domain to show the impact of increased observability. It's been done in our setting, but it's also been done to increase contributions to national parks when people go and they donate to the national park upon entrance. It's been done to increase voting using Facebook badges. It's been done to increase blood donations by putting lists of people who have donated blood a certain number of times in the local newsletter. We even have one economist who he hasn't proven this, but he claimed that the reason the Prius was so successful is because everybody can tell, because the Prius is so ugly, everyone can tell that you're a green. And then one more place where it's been used is actually to shame people into actually paying their taxes. There are some places where there are lists of those people who are non-compliant with their taxes, who haven't paid all the taxes that they owe. And it turns out those lists they've been tested and they are highly effective at getting people to pay their taxes. People really are motivated to get off those lists. I don't know the reference.
Somewhere in India, no, Bangladesh. I don't remember, but anyway, the women basically shamed each other into paying back the $50,000.
Oh, I'll have to ask you later for a reference. Okay, cool. So these are some of the settings where this has been shown. let me show you one more cool thing about observability, and then I'll move on to my next pitfall and solution. But this is potentially useful to you guys. It turns out that even very subtle cues of observability that are not really linked to true reputational returns can work. We're so sensitive to this that, for example, we respond to this image in being the background of our screen versus this image. We actually will give more to charity if this is the image behind the screen, and a lot more to charity. So this actually can increase contributions by 1/3, 50%. It's really remarkable. So our psychology is pretty sensitive to this, and I want to show you one place where we took advantage of this in order to increase voting. So we were asked to get people to vote by sending literally snail mail letters in the mail. We sent about 800,000 of these letters to people. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but we only sent it to Democrats. And these letters that we sent are they're the result of a bunch of behavioral scientists sitting around and testing lots and lots of different kinds of messages to see which ones work best, and then they dumped all of them in this letter. Okay, so we have, as our control group, we have this letter that has the best, everything, everyone, the kitchens think of the best possible treatments in order to get people to vote. And we're going to add one thing to it. We're going to add at the top this sentence that says, you may be called after the election to discuss your experience with the polls. Now, the person's going to call you somebody who you're probably never going to meet. He's not going to tell anybody one way or another. He may call you, not even for sure. But for whatever reason, this might be enough to make you feel like somebody actually cares about this good deed you're being asked to do, and it might feel like it's more observable. And indeed, here's the results. This is the average impact of a get out the vote letter. Across every get out the vote letter study that have been run up until the point of this meta-analysis. Our kitchen sink letter, as you might expect, given that it was highly tuned, is much more effective than that. And on top of that, the intervention I just described with just that little sentence and a little bit of on the bottom that repeated that increases voting by 50%. So that 50% is bigger than the impact of the average get out the vote letter, and it also reduces the cost of getting a vote out from $71 a vote to $47 a vote. So it's very effective to be thinking about how can I make people, give people real reputational returns to their good deeds and make them feel like they're getting reputational returns for their good deeds. Okay, you guys ready for the next pitfall? Yeah, great. So let's go back to our little blue guy, and now let's pretend, and this happens obviously, let's pretend that instead of having an axe here and a watering can, we have two different watering cans. You can do one good deed, or you can do another good deed that's even better. What's a good example of this? You can give to a charity that's really effective, that does what it needs to do extremely efficiently, or you can give to a charity that has, lots of ping pong tables and maybe some overhead, and maybe people are a little bit lazier and they're not checking up on them, and so on and so forth. They both might do the same thing, and you, as the blue guy, need to think about whether, which charity is better, and do a little bit of research to make sure that you're giving to the better charity. That is, that you're using the big watering can versus the small watering can. The key here that we're going to learn from our model is it's not enough to tell the blue guy, hey, you should give to this charity, it's more efficient than this one, or to give them the ability to search for it. They're not even going to be motivated to search for it unless the red guys care about efficiency. So our prescription here is that you need to talk about the effectiveness of people's good deeds in public. You need to talk about it in front of the red guys too. Make sure that the red guys know it as well. And then these blue guys are going to be motivated to do the better deed, not just a good deed. Does that make sense? And I'll just give you one very simple example of this. This is a in the news that I got at some point from Google News. And it told me about a Charity Navigator rating of 4 stars, which is the highest possible rating for Carleton College. And how did it find out about this? Carleton College actually had a press release that said, hey, we got a 4-star rating from Charity Navigator. Look how great we are. Now this is really smart. If you are running an organization that gets some sort of accolade that says, hey, we're really efficient. The thing you do want to do is announce that publicly on something like a web page. The thing you don't want to do is just email your donors and tell them how proud you are of yourself. You want to make sure to have the public website, then point donors to the fact that you have a public website so that they know that not only do they know that this charity is efficient, but anyone who sees them give to the charity will also know that it's efficient. Make sense?
It's like they make us put it on our signatures in the bottom.
Do your charity now get a rating?
Yeah, like where I used to work, we had one of email signatures.
Very cool.
Their names. Like,
Very cool.
pretty important.
Awesome. So they picked up on this. They didn't do it. That's awesome.
I think a lot of places do it now.
Cool. The main thing I want to emphasize here is whenever you're talking about effectiveness, do it in public. It's not enough to just say it. So that's the lesson here. Pointing to a public website is a good way to go.
What about the negative side of that? So
about others in your field.
Yeah, so that's, I think, probably what prevents people from doing that explicitly, is that it creates wars, and wars are costly.
The wounded
and
warrior
probably the word
project.
of charity is not a good idea, but there are other situations.
Yeah, so it's true.
The Wounded Warrior Project. I think.
As well as Dan Pelota's organization, right? So like there are examples, but then typically it's the media that does this, not some sort of organization. So the organizations I know of that try to push people towards more effective charities do it by highlighting the good ones, not by shitting on the bad ones. Not explicitly.
But I want to point out that back to Alia's remark in the beginning that this is very dependent on your cultural definition of good.
Yes.
Because
I'm going to come back to that point, but I agree with you. You want to finish your sentence? Okay, I'll come back to it, and if you don't think I've addressed it fully, then okay.
Just as an example, maybe it's a bit divisive, but NGO Monitor is like an organization that looks at NGOs and tries to evaluate the ones that are less good. So that's an example of an organization that is trying to
I don't focus on them, and everything that I show you today I expect to work, more or less on everyone. I try to talk about, focus on things that are general. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll talk about the next one now. So, for similar reasons, you have the wrong version of the slide deck. That's okay, I'll match.
Fair enough.
Yes, I'm not sure. Okay, for similar reasons, we want to say something along the lines of turn the AC up until the green light turns on. Now, I turn it on, up, I turn the thermostat up, the green light turns on, and now I know that I'm in the range where I'm supposed to be if I'm a nice green person. And not only that, I know anyone who walks by knows that I'm in that range, right? It's either green, it's either on or not. Contrast that with turning the AC past 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, now maybe like if you're looking at the device, you can't tell that it's 70 degrees. Maybe you don't know that it's supposed to be at 70 as opposed to 69, and so on. And so there's some sort of uncertainty about what the observers see here, whether they will reward me for that good deed. And so these requests, these kind of good deeds are going to be more psychologically salient. They're going to work better. They're also simpler than these kinds of requests. So in general, we recommend making things categorical. Any questions on that? So let me give you some more examples of this because I had them on the slide that I updated, but it didn't work. For example, imagine that I'm asking somebody to eat more vegetables. Which one of those is that? Is that continuous or is that discrete? Is that categorical? It's continuous, right? You can eat 4 vegetables, 5 vegetables, 6 vegetables, 7 vegetables. That's not good. You don't want to ask them to eat more vegetables. They won't know whether they've met the enough vegetable criteria. And they won't know whether others will reward them for that. And so what you want to do is tell them, no, you need to eat at least these many vegetables, or you need to eat 1 vegetable. You need to at least have a vegetable a day. Now, obviously eating vegetables is something that's good for you primarily, not good for others necessarily. But in the context that John and I worked in, for example, in Kenya, it was important to get people to take care of themselves so that they wouldn't be sick, so that they wouldn't get others sick. So in those kinds of contexts, people might be more sensitive to that. Another example. Suppose that I want to ask, I'm putting these on the fly, suppose that I want to ask somebody to do something along the lines of energy efficiency, either in their home or in their office. It is better to ask them to do something categorical, like make sure the windows are closed when the air conditioner is on, than it is to tell them, why don't you turn the AC up a little bit. Once again, one of those is going to feel like, oh, I can get kudos for this. I always make sure to keep my windows shut. The other one is going to make it feel harder to, is going to be harder for them to get kudos for, and they're not going to be as sensitive.
Somewhere I remember is like street concrete, so it's like a concrete thing to do. So when like you're designing surveys, you can think of it like that. I don't know. Like,
I agree. So
like this great concrete. Yeah.
I'll give one more example that I think that highlights. So suppose you want people to drive more safely around bicyclists. You could just ask them, drive more safely around bicyclists. It makes it more concrete what it means to do something that is good. What?
It's operative.
Because it's concrete?
Yeah.
Okay.
And not a generalization. It's like it's abstract, and you say, okay, I'll do it like whenever. Not like now, like it refers to a specific action.
That's the sense, I guess, that in which it's concrete. That's another way to say that. But it's also categorical. I either did it or I didn't. And if I didn't do it, then somebody in the car might yell at me, oh, you jerk. You gotta be careful, you're gonna hit somebody in the bike. And I'm gonna feel more like somebody might yell at me about that. Make sense? Okay, the next pitfall. So we have observability, we have making sure, make things observable, we have make sure that things, you talk about efficiency in public, we have make sure that you make things categorical whenever possible. And the next one is going to be the following. A lot of the time, you have a third option here. You can do good, you can do bad, or you can pretend you didn't have the opportunity to do either. Right? You can pretend you didn't notice. And the problem is that a lot of times people really don't notice, and so we don't tend to punish this option. We tend to treat it as basically the same as this option over here. As this option over here, we tend to not equate it with explicitly doing bad. So if that's the case, then we have to try to eliminate that option. We have to try to make it go away. What do I mean? Let me give you some concrete examples. What do I mean? This is an experiment that was run out in San Diego. with the Salvation Army. How many of you guys know what the Salvation Army is? Not everybody. Okay, Salvation Army is a charity that collects money around Christmas. One of the things that it does is collect money around Christmas outside of stores like supermarkets. There's a guy in a funny hat. He goes like this, ding, 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 with a bell. You can see the bell right behind the bucket. You're supposed to pass by and the same door that they were standing by. You actually went out a side door next to the recycling bins and walked all the way around the parking lot. And they actually documented this in the study. And so the second piece of advice, in addition to being explicit when you're requesting something and make the request as explicit as possible, the second piece of advice for you that I have for you is make sure that people have no way to avoid the ask, which I represented here with these two arrows that you perhaps briefly saw that represented standing in front of all doors. Let me give you a real-world example that doesn't have to do with supermarkets. One day I noticed that a friend of mine posted on his wall, "Hi friends, it's that time of year again. This year I've been tasked with asking all of you to donate to our high school's alumni fund. If you graduated from our high school and are really proud of everything that the high school does for kids, then why don't you consider giving?" And I emailed him and I said, "You have a problem, and you know about that problem because you read this paper, and you should, everybody's going to pretend to not see your post. You haven't covered all the doors in the supermarket." I said, take that same message and sure enough, he got no donations when it was just on his wall, and he got quite a few donations when he got on the message. I noticed we're kind of pressuring people into doing something they might not want to do, and in some cases you might want to give them the out. So this is a piece of advice that I'm giving you because it will increase the donations that you get. It will increase, people will do more good. But sometimes it makes them kind of resent you. Like my friend, probably a couple of his friends kind of resented him a little bit for it. And so use this with care. Not necessarily the best thing for the people who you're asking for donations. Sometimes you want to give them out. I want to point out one more thing, which is that these things like sign-up sheets actually have the flavor of an explicit ask. This is a public commitment to do something good. Once you've publicly committed to doing something good, you can't pretend to not know about it. There's no plausible deniability anymore.
School and
Was it that I will not harass?
yeah, and then you put your name on it, and then everyone was linked then, like ceremoniously around the thing, but I didn't think that would be really effective, but maybe it is, I don't know.
So first of all, anyone who then harasses someone is really going to be a jerk, right?
Well, I mean, I didn't think it was, yeah.
The thing about harassment itself, they're already a jerk, right? So you harass someone. Well, we all think you're a jerk. The fact that you pledged before makes you a hypocritical jerk. But I don't know how much more of an impact that's going to have. So the place where we thought we were going to use it is slightly different. What we wanted to do is to increase monitoring. We wanted you to feel like somebody would tell on you if you harassed on someone. And so what we wanted people to pledge was not to harass, but rather, if you say something, if you see something, say something. And we're in the process of working with both Harvard and Yale to set up a hotline where you can anonymously send a tip, and the security guards will come investigate the situation. And the main thing that we want to do to get people to actually use this hotline is to get them to pledge up front. Or trying to like shut down a competing party, or if you just want to go to sleep, shut down the party. We could do that.
Very low.
Because we want to encourage people to actually send a text, and they don't want to. And we've been told that
Why don't they want to know that they're not?
we've been told that people are averse to that they don't want to be seen as the person telling on someone, and that they would be more likely to, according to folks who know or experts in sexual harassment, trying to get people to speak up. It's a sensitive topic for people to. Not an expertise of mine, but that's why we want it to be anonymous.
And this is kind of going deeper into the just question, understanding your idea, but I mean, if you look at the cases of sexual harassment and they're mostly at these parties and people are drinking, can you really count on people to be as observant as they would be in a normal situation when they're...
No.
Maybe there's one
I mean, everybody is more
Yeah.
observant when they are not drinking than when they are.
Yeah, but I mean, like, yeah, because usually you don't.
But the
And then there's the question of what's the line? Where do you start reporting someone if you got it, like, kind of,
that's a totally fair question.
Yeah, that's kind of,
I guess the question is like, will this pledge improve things?
yeah.
Will it make it perfect? No way. But will it improve things? Will it make people feel like they're more likely to get caught? I'm hoping so, obviously, because I'm pushing the solution.
And
But maybe
you
that-
said also maybe through an app where they can be more discreet about it, or?
So it's a text messaging platform, so you don't have
Okay,
to
so they
download
don't have to
it.
be like, pull out their phone and.
You just send a
Hi.
text to
Campus police.
417-HELP or whatever, and it should be. It should be simple. And we understand that it needs to be simple. It needs to be simple also for the other questions? Okay. All right. The last thing I want to talk about, the last potential pitfall, and this should address your point. I mentioned earlier that it can be in equilibrium for the blue guy to do the good deed, so long as these guys are conditioning their interaction later with the blue guy on whether he does the good deed. Turns out that's not the only equilibrium, it's not the only thing that we might see. It can also not be a good deed. What does that mean in English? That it could not be an equilibrium. What does that mean in English? Sometimes you're expected to do good stuff and sometimes you're not. So for example, this drives me nuts. In Israel, you are not expected to stand on the right on an escalator. That sucks.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to walk up the escalator while all you lazy bums stand on the right. You go ahead, be lazy. I want to walk. I got somewhere to be. I can't. But in other places, many other places, it's a very strong expectation that you will make yourself slightly less comfortable by moving over to the right and standing in line. That's true in Washington, D.C., for example. It's true in Japan. It's very funny. If you look in Japan at people getting off of the train, you guys know the subways in Tokyo, for example, are very, very full. Everybody lines up and walks up the stairs. For Israelis, this is like unbelievable. They walk up the stairs in two files, and they wait in line longer. They don't go around the line in order to get by faster. They wait to go up the line so that they will not block the other side of the stairs in case somebody needs to come down, even if nobody is coming down the stairs. So in Japan, there's an expectation that you water the tree if you stand to the right. In Israel, there isn't that expectation. And as somebody who comes from a place where there's the expectation, of course, I feel like everybody around me is a jerk, but they just think I'm a jerk for trying to push by them. So the norms can vary from place to place. What you're expected to do can vary from place to place. In the technical language, that's because it can be in equilibrium, but cannot be in equilibrium to give to the public good. Now, if it's not already in equilibrium to give to the public good in this particular place, i.e. it's not a norm in this place to do the thing that you want people to do, you need to establish the norm. That is, you need to tell the blue guy, we expect you to water the tree. I'm not going to go into a ton of details on what can establish a norm. There's a little bit of research on what kinds of things can establish a norm versus what kinds of things cannot. For example, you have to establish the norm basically public. It's very important to do it in public. If there's no norm at all in the culture. But oftentimes, what I am going to talk about is situations where it actually is a norm to do the good deed, and people don't realize it. The people who you're asking to do stuff don't know about it. In these places, if you're trying to tackle this last 2% or this last 15%, especially in Sweden, you tell them, hey, almost everybody's donating, and that's going to make them feel like a jerk for not donating. So something like over 95% contribute is going to be very effective. Another place where this has been done is trying to get people to donate to the alumni charity. If you tell people, hey, more than half of your colleagues are donating, they become more likely to donate. If you tell them less than half are donating, we've actually done these controlled studies. If you tell them 64% versus 46%, you actually get an increase in donation rates. So people are attentive to this. They also will attend to this if you tell them 3/4 of the people in a hotel room reuse their towels, they become more likely to reuse their towels. So we've seen this in lots of different domains. So that's one way to establish a norm. Why is this establishing the norm? It's telling people exactly what other people are doing. And presumably if they're doing that, it's because they're expected to do it. And so they themselves will do it. This is called a descriptive norm. Descriptive because it describes other people's behavior. It's not the only way to establish a norm. Another way is to just tell people, hey, we expect you, and we're going to talk about this example more later. We expect you to do this. So look at the language in this. It says, attention, your dog did his duty, please do yours. Right? And so, in this case, you're establishing that it is the norm to pick up after the dog in this neighborhood. Now, it's not enough to just put up signs like this, as we're going to discuss when we break out into sections, but this is at least a good step in the right direction in establishing that we expect you to do this action.